I don't believe in God, but I'm afraid of him. If people know, this is Gabriel Garcia Marquez, said it in one of his books. And for me, it was the first time I heard him from my Isa, and I was very unimpressed by this young, handsome, sexy man that walked into the room. And I said, well, it's simple. You either believe and fear, or don't believe and don't fear. You can't be confused. 2 years later, while I was working at a paint producing factory, Isa comes in because he was still serving, still doing his national service. And he was working for a military institution somewhere based in Baghdad. And he came for an order of paint. And then we ended up chatting again about Gabriel Garcia Marquez, but this time about our fantasies about going and living in Latin America one day. Few encounters because he had to come back a few times to the factory. He asked me out. So he took me to this gorgeous hotel in the middle of Baghdad called Babylon. And I remember sitting there for 15 minutes, and then he suddenly said, Wafa, would you marry me? And I said, yes. So we got engaged in the summer of 1986. We were part of a crowd of friends. And my friends were planning a New Year party. And for a woman to go and party all night in Baghdad, she had to be married. So I decided to get married on the 25th of December of that year for me to be able to go and party all night, which I did at the end. Then we marry, and both of us, absolutely no children. Who would want to bring children to the Republic of Fear? Who would want their children to grow up under a dictatorship, war after war after war? 5 months later, I was pregnant. So what do we do? Oh my God, do you know what? Let's keep it, let's see what happens. And God, how glad I am with that decision, because I have a lovely son sitting somewhere in the audience here today. And he was the most beautiful child ever born on earth. Then Kuwait happened. And Isa was still serving in the army. So he was transferred to Kuwait towards, I don't know, the autumn of 1990. But bizarrely, he was still coming back for his 7 days leave every month. And again, the New Year party was the best ever New Year party that we had. Because you know what? This is it. Our life will end after that because of the chemical weapon that we were all expecting. Then he goes back to Kuwait. Then my dad died. Then my uncle died. And towards the middle of February, Isa comes back. And the country was crumbling. There was no electricity, no petrol, no cars running. So we had to walk back from my uncle's house to our house, which was great news for me because my son was born early because of that long walk I did, I think. I think my son was a month. I can't even remember the dates anymore. And Isa left the house for something silly, can't remember. And then, exhausted with a small child, I slept. Woke up a few hours later, the lights were all on, and Isa wasn't back. And Isa wasn't back in these circumstances was a big, huge thing. Something had happened. But later on, we waited and waited and waited, and Isa wasn't back. So he became one of the disappeared. I can't tell you if it was a week or 2 weeks, because my mind blocked that period from my life. I have no idea why. Anyway, let's say 2 weeks, 2 months, Isa comes back, filthy, long beard, very noticeable weight loss. But it wasn't that. It was something in his eyes that caught my attention. He wasn't my Isa. He was a broken man. And the first thing he said to me, my son is not going to grow up in this country, and we have to leave. But it took us years to make that decision. It took us years to accept that we have to leave our lives behind and our families behind. And through various coincidences, we found ourselves in Glasgow. So Glasgow became home. A few years later, we started building our life here. So I got my job. He's got his dream job as a curator of Islamic art at the Borough Collection. And one day, we were doing some silly shopping for the house, came back to the house, and Isa just collapsed. Nothing before that. So all what I found myself doing is, well, I did everything. I called 999, I knocked on the neighbors' doors, I asked for help. But in my head, I was looking at this man lying, and I was just saying, what are you doing? Where are you going? You can't leave me. You can't just go. That can't be it. But that was it. He was gone. So what do? Do I take him and the kids and go back home? In my head, that phrase that he told me when he came back after he was disappeared for a while, my son is not going to grow up here, just made it for me. I had to stay. I had to keep him here and keep the kids here. Since arriving to Glasgow back in 1996, I went twice with the kids to Baghdad. The first one was in 2003, after the fall of the statue, thinking that's it. And the second one just a couple of weeks ago. And every time I go back home, there is one thing in my head. Is it another time for me now to make a decision? Another decision to either stay or go back? And both times, I come very close to keep the kids with me and stay there, but something happens to tell me, no, it's not the right time, and it's still not the country that Isa would have wanted our kids to grow up. So that's it. Glasgow is home, and it might never be the right time for me to go back, but I think in my head, for me, that will always be the question. When is the right time for me to go back? Baghdad is my home, but Glasgow is the home of my kids. Thank you.